What if the line between activism and terrorism is being redrawn in real time right under our noses? A recent presidential memorandum signed by Donald Trump has ignited a firestorm of debate, positioning itself as a crackdown on domestic terrorism. But critics argue it's a veiled attempt to silence dissent. This isn't just about policy, it's about power, perception, and the dangerous game of labeling who gets to speak and who gets silenced. Let's unpack why this memo is already sparking controversy and why it might be the most polarizing move of the year. On Thursday, Trump released a sweeping executive action claiming to combat a radical left-wing terror network. The memo, delivered in the Oval Office with his cabinet in attendance, promises to deploy the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Forces, the Department of Justice, and the Treasury to investigate, disrupt, and dismantle organized political violence. But here's where it gets controversial. The targets aren't clearly defined. Instead of naming specific groups or individuals, Trump hinted at billionaires like George Soros and Reid Hoffman, suggesting their financial support for activism could land them in the crosshairs. I hear about him. Maybe it could be him. It could be a lot of people, he said cryptically, leaving room for speculation and fear. The Open Society Foundations, funded by Soros, has already fired back, calling the administration's approach politically motivated attacks on civil society. Meanwhile, the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, labeled the memo a shameful and dangerous move, accusing the government of weaponizing the term domestic terrorism to stifle free speech. Hina Shamsi, director of the ACLU's National Security Project, warned of a chilling pattern. After one of the most harrowing weeks for our First Amendment rights, the president is invoking political violence as an excuse to target nonprofits and activists. But here's the twist. The memo's legal teeth might be weaker than they appear. Columbia Law School professor Daniel Richman, a former federal prosecutor, noted that executive orders can't create new crimes. This doesn't invent new offenses, he explained. It just tells existing agencies to focus their tools on causes they already have authority over. Yet the real danger lies in how that authority is wielded. The concern is that this administration is only interested in pursuing politically oriented terrorism that disagrees with its agenda, Richman added. In other words, the memo might not be illegal, but it could be deeply unfair. And this is the part most people miss. The memo conveniently lumps together a patchwork of unrelated events to justify its narrative. From the assassination attempt on Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh in 2022 to the recent Dallas ICE facility shooting, which authorities say had no clear ties to a broader group, the administration is painting a picture of coordinated left-wing violence. Even the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in Manhattan is now framed as part of this terrorist network, despite no evidence linking it to any ideological group. Stephen Miller, the White House's deputy chief of staff, called the initiative historical and significant, claiming it's the first time the U.S. is targeting left-wing terrorism and Antifa as a unified threat. But critics argue this ignores the reality of right-wing extremism, which has also targeted Democrats and leftists in recent years. The fallout is already messy. After the Dallas shooting, Trump blamed the radical left Democrats for demonizing law enforcement, despite investigators finding no evidence the suspect was part of any organized group. Similarly, his executive order designating Antifa, a decentralized, leaderless movement, as a domestic terrorist organization has been mocked as both legally dubious and politically expedient. Jason Charter, a former activist charged during Trump's first term for tearing down a statue of Andrew Jackson, put it plainly. Antifa is anti-fascism. Being against fascism shouldn't be illegal. So, where does this leave us? The memo's supporters argue it's a necessary step to protect democracy from violent extremists. Its detractors see a dangerous precedent that could criminalize peaceful protest and punish dissent. As Shamsi pointed out, history shows this isn't the first time activists have been branded as threats. Civil rights leaders were once labeled security risks and investigated. Is the government protecting citizens? Or is it weaponizing fear to suppress opposition? The answer might depend on which side of the political aisle you're on. We'd love to hear your take. Is this a legitimate effort to combat terrorism, or is it a power play to silence critics? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to ask yourself, when does activism become a terrorist threat, and who gets to decide?